Hello everyone, welcome back to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ari Stamatakos, and today we are back with a slightly different video here on the YouTube channel. Now, on Monday, the FA announced that the expression of interest application period has closed for the National Second Division that will be starting up in 2024. And of course, 32 clubs have now officially put in their expression of interest to be a part of the National Second Division. So there's 32 clubs that we're going to run through, and in this video, we're going to be looking at some potential reasons why some clubs should be put in and some reasons why they shouldn't. Some potential quotas that need to be met, and at the end of it, I'm gonna conclude with my rough 12 to 16 team list that I think should be a part of the National Second Division. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you leave your thoughts of your 16 or your 12 to 16 teams that should be a part of the National Second Division. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start this video by running through the 32 teams that have put in their expression of interest, and there are a couple of teams that are like new franchises in a sense, and those are Brisbane United, which is a merger between three different clubs, between Wynnum Wolves, Brisbane Strikers, and Virginia United. So those three clubs have now merged or have put in a joint bid at least to become Brisbane United, and then Football South Australia, which is a joint bid in a sense with Campbelltown City, Northeastern Metro Stars, and West Torrens Soccer Club. So those two clubs in a sense are now new entities in which those three respective clubs from both Brisbane and Adelaide have put in a joint bid or have merged to become one club into this, or one club to put in a bid for the National Second Division. So to run you through all 32 teams, we start with Canberra, Croatia, and Gungahlin United from the ACT. Then from New South Wales, we've got Apia, Blacktown, Fraser Park, Marconi, Rockdale, Sutherland Sharks / Cronulla Sharks. Of course, that is a joint bid as well with that. Sydney Olympic, Sydney United, and Wollongong. From Northern New South Wales, you have Valentine FC. Then you've got Brisbane City, Brisbane United, of course, is those three clubs that I just mentioned. Gold Coast Knights, Gold Coast United, Olympic FC, Peninsula Power, and Sunshine Coast FC. From South Australia, we've got Adelaide City, Football South Australia, which is that merger club, and then Playford City Soccer and Community Club. You've got South Hobart from Tasmania. From Victoria, we've got Avondale, Bentley, Brunswick Juventus, Green Gully, Heidelberg United, Melbourne Knights, Preston Lions, South Melbourne. And then from Western Australia, we got Spearwood and Cockburn City FC, or SC, who have put in like a joint bid, I assume, considering that it's listed as one kind of entity. So yeah, they're the 32 clubs, they're the 32 teams and 32 entities that have put in their expression of interest to be a part of this National Second Division. We do know that it will be a max of 16 teams with a minimum of 12. So there is quite a few teams that, in my opinion at least, are almost certainties to be put into the National Second Division, and we'll run through my opinion on that a little bit later on. But when we look at the National Second Division, and when we look at the potential clubs that could be put into it or could have a place in the National Second Division, we need to look at a couple of things, and there are in my opinion, three criteria in which that clubs need to meet to be at least considered. The first one, or considered for the National Second Division, the first one to me is an established fan base. Now, the reason I say this, and this kind of has partly a reason because of, or partly reason due to the lack of an established fan base for some A-League clubs. And when you start a new league, in a sense, and that is what the National Second Division will be, it's a brand new league, that it doesn't really have a structure or a foundation yet. What you need pre-existing foundations, and you need pre-existing structures to be brought into the league to give it some form of reputation, in a sense. What the A-League struggled with, or has come to struggle with in a sense a little bit as the league has matured, in a sense, is that the lack of true foundations from most of the clubs when the A-League has started have kind of come back to haunt the A-League, in a sense. We all know the attendance figures in recent years haven't been the best. Yes, COVID did have something to do with that, but even prior, the attendances were slowly decreasing. So what you get with having clubs with an established fan base in a new league is that the league won't struggle with, will be very unlikely for the league to struggle with sliding attendances if the teams in the new league already have established fan bases and already have a community feeling around them, where the people have gone for generations. There is a connection to the club, there's a connection to the community that will give the league a lot more of a better reputation in terms of an actual league that will maintain its fan base and will maintain its integrity, in a sense, from the external perspective. For those who are involved into the A-League, and for those who are like who A-League fanatics, in a sense, we all know that there are fan bases for every club. They're just hiding, in a sense, for whatever reason. Whereas if you look at it from an external perspective, it does look like some A-League clubs just have no fan base whatsoever, where we can see that isn't necessarily the case in most parts. However, what you get with the National Second Division is you get a fan base that, for the most part, well, with the clubs that have an established fan base, if you bring them into the National Second Division, for the most part, you won't really see attendance figures drop. You may not see your 20, 30,000 attendance figures that we see in some A-League games in the past and even recently, but you will see a pretty consistent level of attendance, and you will see a pretty consistent level of fan base because they're already established clubs with established fan bases and established community feeling around them. So that, to me, is the first criteria. The second criteria, and this surely should go without kind of stating, I don't really think this is all, I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel by using this as a criteria, but the clubs must be financially secure. They must be in a position where it must be financially viable for the club to be involved in the National Second Division. We've seen, of course, clubs come into the A-League and then fold because of a variety of different reasons, but I assume one of the reasons is that financially they just weren't up to scratch. Of course, Gold Coast United and of course North Queensland Fury and other clubs of the similar ilk have come and gone from the A-League, and I'm assuming financial reasons were a big part of that. So the clubs being financially viable is a massive point that needs to be fully addressed and needs to be certain that every club in the National Second Division is very, very financially secure to maintain their status in the Second Division, and to maintain not only their status in the Second Division, because we all know at the start of the league there won't be any promotion relegation, so we'll operate similarly to how the A-League operates, where if you finish last there isn't any real kind of negative to finishing last, in a sense, other than bragging rights. So what the clubs need to make sure, and what the league needs to make sure, is that every club is financially viable or is financially secure and has the finances to compete every single year at a competitive level, rather than just existing in the league for the sake of existing. That, of course, being able to not go bankrupt and not go into administration is obviously a main thing. That's something that really is a non-negotiable, I should say, but I think it's just valuable to mention. Of course, being able to just pay players, pay staff, pay grounds, pay any sort of admin fees on time, and not have any sticky situations come from that respect. And of course, the plan is for every club to be professional. The plan is for every player to be professional, and every staff to be paid, and every staff member to be paid around the clock 52 weeks of the year. I'm 90% sure that is the case. So, of course, being financially secure is the main thing, in my opinion. That is the number one criteria, and that is the number one thing. That you could have the best stadium, you could have the best fan base, you could have the best team in the league, but if you are bankrupt, and if you can't pay your players, and if you can't pay your stadium rent, or if you can't pay admin fees, there is really no point in having you in the league, because it's just going to cause a massive mess, massive upheaval within the league, and it's going to be a bad look for the league and the reputation of the league, and thus the reputation of football in this country. So we need to make sure that every club is financially secure, and I think that also ties into being able to have the resources, because if you have the resource, or if you have the finances, that means you should have the resources. So I think those two go in hand. A proper training place, a proper stadium, proper a proper professional football club with proper professional resources. Like I said, a proper stadium is the number one, a proper training base, a proper HQ. These are just non-negotiables for clubs who want to be professional clubs and who want to break into that top division in Australian football, which eventually, with promotion and relegation, will come about. And the third thing for me is not really as much of a non-negotiable as the first two, but I think it does add something to, in which we touched on in the first criteria, or with the established fan base. And this criteria is having a solid history with football in this country. Now, while this isn't as much of a non-negotiable as obviously being financially secure is, because you can survive as a professional football club and you can thrive, in fact, without having a massive history. Of course, most A-League clubs have only been around for 20 years, right, for the best part of 20 years. So having a solid history isn't make or break. However, it does tie into having an established fan base, having a reputation, having a proper community vibe. If these clubs, you can point to clubs like South Melbourne, you can point to clubs like Marconi and Apia, who have very, very rich histories in this country when it comes to football, and are football or were at least football powerhouses in this country back in the old NSL days. I think that is very important to have. I wouldn't say every club, but to have most clubs with a history and with a proper backstory and have a proper heritage and a lineage of success and of running their football club in, for the most part, in a successful way. I think that is a very important part. Like I said, it's not make or break. However, I do think it is a very important part into having a successful national second division. So they're the three main criteria for the clubs that will be entering the national second division. They need to meet at least of being financially secure. That is a non-negotiable. Having an established fan base to me is very, very important. It's almost a non-negotiable. However, I can see some very rare exceptions in which not having an established fan base isn't the be-all and end-all, and some clubs can get away with it. And of course, to me, having a solid, rich history in Australian football is something that would be nice to have. However, it isn't the end of the world. So yeah, they're the three criteria that I think every club that wants to be in the national second division, or every club that should be accepted into the national second division must meet if they were to compete in that league. So they're the three criteria. Let's move on to two other potential sticking points or potential talking points around the national second division, and in particular with the teams that will be coming in and whether or not it is a competitor to the A-League or whether or not it complements it. Okay, so let's move on to the second portion of this video in a sense, and this is where I want to bring up 2 points in which I think are important to speak about when talking about the National Second Division and when speaking about potential teams that could be involved in the National Second Division. Now, the first thing to me is whether or not it should have a quota per kind of state or territory. Now, this is of course something that has kind of fallen on its sword in a little bit, considering that no Western Australian clubs put in their expression of interest to be a part of the division. However, when you are looking at the fact that there are ACT clubs and there are Tasmanian clubs involved in this, I do raise the question as to whether or not there will be or whether or not there should be a quota. Personally, I think it should be a meritocracy. I don't think that a quota fits the way that the league is trying to market itself and fits the way that kind of football operates in a sense. I don't think a quota is something that is majorly important to the successful kind of operations of the league, and whether that means there being, of the 16 teams, whether that means there being 6 teams from Victoria, 6 teams from New South Wales, and then 2 teams from Brisbane, Adelaide and ACT and Tasmania, like each, or respectively I should say, so 2 teams from the remaining states and territories, so be it, in my opinion. I understand the point of view where it is important, if it's a national second division, to have proper national representation, because if you're going to have 6 teams from Victoria, 6 teams from New South Wales, 1 team from Brisbane, 1 team from Adelaide, it is a little bit of what is really the point, especially considering the fact that the Brisbane and Adelaide teams will have to travel every second week, whereas the Victorian teams will have to travel properly 8 times a year instead of Brisbane and Adelaide travelling every second week, right? So it does create a little bit of an integrity issue, you could say. However, if football is a true meritocracy, which in my opinion it is, I think it should be purely based on the best teams and the teams that are going to provide the best quality and the teams that are going to be the best suited to the league. So that is my opinion on the potential for a quota, which I have seen floated around in the media at times. So that is that. And the second thing is whether or not the National Second Division, because of the lack of promotion relegation, will become a rival in a sense to the A-League, or whether or not it will complement it. Now, I want to keep this brief, but in my opinion, I think the National Second Division should be a league that complements the A-League rather than competing against it, because eventually, once promotion relegation comes in, it is going to be a feeder. It is going to be a feeder league to the A-League in its inception. I do think teams or players that are playing for, I don't know, your Wollongongs or your South Melbournes or your whoever gets invited into the National Second Division, they will have aspirations in playing in the A-League and playing, of course, overseas and etc., etc. So I do think it will initially be a feeder league. While I don't necessarily think the National Second Division should market itself as a feeder league, we are just the second rung down from the A-League, I do think it can't market itself as a competitor to the A-League, because eventually, once promotion relegation comes in, that will create a massive kind of like a massive kind of the cognitive dissonance in a sense between there being a national second division which is better than the A League, which is a league that's been around for longer but is the top division, but the second division is better and has a better fan base, etc., etc. So I do think the league needs to be very careful with how it's marketed. I do think the clubs in the national second division, while they may be better clubs, if you were to call them that, than some clubs in the A League, I do think it needs to be very careful in the way that it markets itself. And I do think it needs to be very careful in the way that it does promote itself. It needs to know what it is in a sense. And if it does market itself as a competitor to the A League rather than a complement for it, I do think that it will be a net negative for football in this country, because all parties need to work together in a sense, because the reason this league has been brought in is because it needs to improve football in this country, and creating even more faction rivalries and creating even more division and creating this kind of separation and this segregation between fan groups and between leagues will only continually hurt football in this country even more. All parties need to work together to overall improve the game. So that is just my 2 cents in a sense of explaining why I think the national second division needs to be very careful with the way that it markets itself. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know your thoughts on how the national second division should market itself, whether or not it will be a competitor to the A League, whether or not you think it should be a competitor to the A League, and that will drive the A League to have better standards, etc., etc. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below, and we're going to finish up this video by touching on the 12 to 16 clubs, in my opinion, who should be involved in the national second division. So let's finish this video up by looking at the teams that I think should be involved in the national second division. Now, I've categorized 21 teams into 2 sections. The 21 teams of the 32, I've categorized them into almost certainties and probably teams. Of course, 21 doesn't go into 16, so 5 teams will miss out. But the teams that I've got in almost certain, there's 13 teams, and they are South Melbourne, Wollongong, Adelaide City, Gold Coast Knights, Apia, Marconi, Sydney Olympic, Wollongong, Canberra Croatia, South Hobart, Avondale, Melbourne Knights, and Sydney United. Now, Sydney United does, on my notes anyway, on my run sheet, has an asterisk next to it. Of course, we do know the potential risks that are associated with Sydney United, of course, with their indiscretions, most notably in the Australia Cup, but also most recently they had another minor indiscretion that could be a little bit of a sticky situation, depending on how the national second division wants to market themselves, or whether or not the national second division wants them in the league. I'm personally not going to give my thoughts on that, but I do understand why, if they aren't accepted into national second division, I can understand to a certain extent why. However, there are pros and cons for every team. So this isn't a purely Sydney United issue. However, we all know what's happened. I don't really think I need to explain it, but yeah, they have an asterisk next to them on my run sheet. Let me know let me know their situation and what it means to you in the comments below, and whether or not you think that it should be a learning curve, whether or not they should be not allowed into it because of what's happened. Let me know your thoughts below. And of course, and in the probably section, there's 8 teams. I've got Blacktown City, Bentley, Heidelberg, Peninsula Power, Gold Coast United, Preston Lions, Brisbane City, and Brisbane United. Now, of course, there's 8 teams that go into the probably category, 13 that go into the almost certain. We can have the league with just the 13 teams, of course, but I'm looking at it as I think there will be 16 clubs. I think there should be 16 clubs anyway. So from the 3 of the 18, 5 will miss. From the 3 of the 8, 5 will miss out. I can't really put a finger on the 3 that I would pick. I potentially am leading to someone like a Preston Lions, potentially, maybe a Brisbane City, potentially, Brisbane United, potentially. I don't know. Of course, I'm coming from a slightly Victorian biased perspective. Of course, I do live in Victoria, so I'm slightly more clued up on the Victorian clubs. So if you are watching from New South Wales or from Brisbane, Adelaide, and you think that I've got some clubs, my opinion on some clubs are horribly wrong, make sure you let me know in the comments below. I would love to learn more about some other clubs and whether, I don't know, whether or not Blacktown City are a 100% lock, or for example like that. But yeah, they're the 13 clubs that I think are almost certain, and the 8 clubs that I think are probably in terms of on the Richter scale of likely to unlikely to be put into the National Second Division. But yeah, they're my thoughts, they're my 2 cents. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave your thoughts on which teams you think should be involved in the National Second Division. Make sure you leave your thoughts on anything I've said throughout this video. I will be very intrigued to read the comments and read some of your guys' thoughts. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel, like the video. See you guys next time, and goodbye.